I am Bob McCown. He is John Shannon, and together we're Bob McCown and John Shannon, I guess. I can't think of any.
You must. Are you tired from watching all the sports this weekend, Bob? You exhausted?
I'm pretty tired. I must confess.
Yeah. Did you stay up? Stay up late again?
No, I didn't watch any of the late games. I wasn't compelled to stay awake until 2:00 in the morning. Although I know you were.
Yes.
And luckily for you, there are no games at 8 a.m. because I'm sure you were still tucked away in your little bed.
No, up bright and early, baby. Up bright and early.
Well, we're going to talk about
for the podcast.
We're going to talk about round one now that it is concluded. It took long enough to get it done. The only team that really got a lot of rest out of this was the Colorado Avalanche. And we'll see what that brings for them, whether it means something positive or negative, at least at the start of the next series. But Steve Simmons of the Toronto Sun, Paul Dupont of the Boston Globe will join us. We'll reflect on round one and get some anticipatory thoughts on round two, all when we come back on the Bob McCown podcast after these messages. Well, we survived round one, but it took a while. Have we ever had this many 7-game series in the first round, John?
Yes, but it's been a long time. I think 1992, there were 6 7-gamers.
And have we ever had as many overtimes in game 7s?
Probably not. But there was, the 1997. There was a back-to-back game 7 double OT on a Saturday night, one in Buffalo and one in Dallas. So not much difference from last night when the games in Calgary and the game at Madison Square Garden ended in overtime.
Steve Simmons of the Toronto Sun, Paul Dupont of the Boston Globe joining us.
Two loser team guys,
Yeah, to chat. Well, why don't you start it, Shannon? I mean, this is your bailiwick.
Well, I think both the Bruins and the Maple Leafs probably have to look at how they exited from the playoffs a little differently, I would suspect. One's a team that's supposed to be on the rise, and one's a team that's on the decline. So, Steve, how would you define what the Maple Leafs did against Tampa in Game 7 and the series?
I actually thought they performed reasonably well considering who the opponent was and that they were in there. If you look at 7 games, the Leafs had 216 shots on goal and Tampa had 215. The Leafs had 24 goals and Tampa had 23. It was a close series. Does that excuse them for losing again first round? I think at this point, no. You can't give them passes anymore for being defeated in the first round, even if it happens to be the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champions. But I thought they had a representative series, which they didn't have last year against Montreal, and they didn't have the year before against Columbus. So this was a step up. It just wasn't a step up one more game.
And Kevin, was this bonus time for the Bruins?
I guess, but I got to go back to Steve for a second. So ultimately, where did they lose?
I mean, they lost, in my opinion, they lost because when it really mattered, the best goalie in the world was the best goalie in the world.
Yeah.
And when you're playing against a team that's got the best goalie in the world, and for my money, the best defenseman in the world, and maybe the best coach in the world, that's a tough mountain to climb. I thought they were right sort of on the precipice. They were right there climbing that mountain.
Yeah. A
save that Vasilevsky makes on Austin Matthews that would have put the Leafs up 2-1 in the game is the kind of save that 90% of NHL goalies don't make. And when that happens, and you could almost see a pin stick in the Leafs at that point, God, if we can't score doing that, how are we going to score?
Right.
And I would argue that the loss in Game 6 was probably worse than the loss in Game 7. Wouldn't you, Steve?
Yeah, because in Game 6, they dominated overtime.
Yeah.
They were very sharp.
4 shots on goal in the third period too, Steve. 4.
Well, they also had that terrible, 2-man disadvantage, which started, unfortunately, with a penalty that wasn't one. So, you get behind, you give Kucherov and Stamkos a 2-man advantage in any situation, they're going to score. And they did. And so the game got tied. And you would have thought after Tavares had those 2 goals in the last minute of the second period, that would have been the kind of energy that would have propelled them to victory. And then they come out for overtime and they dominate until they make one mistake and bang, it's down the ice and it's in the net. And typically, like most overtime goals, they're not pretty. You know, someone shoots a puck and somebody bangs at it and somebody else bangs at it and it's between Jack Campbell's legs and it's in the net. And instead of winning the series when they had the chance in Game 6 to win it, you know, they go home for 7. And I thought they had a representative game at home in Game 7. But, you know, the high-scoring Leafs scored 1 goal at home in Game 7. That's not good enough.
Well, the performance of the Maple Leafs, I think, is relevant to, as you pointed out, or the forgiveness for losing again in the opening round is, well, you played the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champions. But yet to be determined is how good are the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champions? They were barely good enough to beat the Toronto Maple Leafs. They'll now play Florida, who presume to be a stiffer opposition. I think you got to wait and see how they do against Florida, because I don't make Tampa the favorite in that series. I make Florida a significant favorite in that series. And if they lost to a team that isn't as good as they were the last 2 years, don't you have to factor that into your evaluation overall?
Well, I think you're right about Tampa right now. And I disagree that Florida will be the favorite. I didn't like the way Florida played, frankly, in round 1. I think they were lucky to get past a pretty ordinary Washington Capitals team. And they didn't look to me like a playoff team. They didn't look like they understood what playoff hockey is. The Tampa Bay Lightning have a PhD in playoff hockey. And you know, whether they win the series or not, I don't know. I'm such a terrible prognosticator that I'm not going to sit here and make another round of terrible picks. But I like Tampa to win that series. And I just think they're so professional and nothing rattles them and they just go on. And, their high end talent takes care of things and their bottom roster guys seem to take care of things. And I happen to adore John Cooper as a coach. I think he's the best in the business.
Oh, so do I.
Him and Mike Sullivan to me are at a level of, beyond almost everybody else. But let's see what Andrew Burnett, the coach in Florida. It's his first year as an NHL head coach. His first year really as a head coach anywhere.
Yeah.
Let's see how he holds up when you're matching wits with the best in the game.
KP, jump in.
Could we go with Ferentz as the coach because I could use an off-day story? That'd be good.
All those Andrews look alike.
So we've talked about a lot about the Maple Leafs, Kevin. I do wonder about where the Bruins are in all this and what's going to happen in Boston. Bergeron, you think he's retiring? I do. Yeah. And I'll just touch back with, I agree with virtually everything Steve has said there. I know that's not good talk radio or a good podcast or whatever, but totally on Tampa. I think on Miami's play or Florida's play, I think they were in that sort of vacuum of not having won for a century, so had to get by it. I think their game will pick up now. Whether that's good enough to beat Tampa for all those reasons Steve laid out. I love the defenseman, love the goaltender. You can see them winning with that and not even talk about their forwards. That's how good they are. So all that. Boston, obviously in a much different situation. I do think Bergeron will retire. I just had that. I've had that sense here for the last 3 or 4 weeks, just in sizing up where they are as a franchise and then sizing up how they looked in their very last game. I don't think, if you're Bergeron after all these years, he has spent half his lifetime here now in Boston playing for this team. I don't think anybody reasonably looks at it and says, well, if he were to sign on for another year or two, they've got a real sincere, bona fide kick at the cup. I don't. They're not there. And I think this series underscored it, although part of the reason I asked Steve about, what was the delta in that Toronto series, just similar in this series, I could compare the two teams and you look at face-off percentage and hits and shots on goal and all of it. It's all rather close, which I guess is
a symptomatic or a symptom of the, Gary Bettman's full equity, full parity NHL. Where I thought the Bruins lost, and this was true in 18 against Tampa, 20 against Tampa, 21 against the Islanders, is when it comes time to win it, meaning you got to get to the net and do something with it. You got to will it in. You got to do whatever that's not there. Now, Carolina also doesn't have that sort of, and maybe my thinking is antiquated about just, haul ass to the front and play that Johan Franzen role and, be the mule who gets it done. That isn't how the game is played. But Carolina does get all five guys there. They're playing for shots, they're playing for tips, they're playing for deflections. When it doesn't happen initially, they collapse in there. You didn't see that with the Bruins. You just see this constant sort of play make, try the rush, throw one in, and it didn't happen for them.
Carolina has 20 Rod Brindamore clones playing for them.
That's right.
I've never seen a team play more like their coach than that team does. That said, when I watched how it ended for the Bruins and when I watched how it ended for the Leafs, one similarity. A guy who had almost done nothing for the team he was playing for won the game that day. It was Max Domi, who had been almost invisible all season long, first in Columbus and then in Carolina, having a phenomenal day and scored a beautiful goal and set up a beautiful goal. So, really nice plays. And Nick Paul, who playing in his first year in the playoffs, scored his first two playoff goals, to knock out the Leafs. So sometimes you need those middle of to bottom of the roster guys to come out of nowhere when the Ahos and the Svechnikovs and the Marchands and the Pasternaks aren't getting it done.
All that did, Steve, with Max and Nick doing what they did, was justify next year's trade deadline coverage. We're going on at 5 a.m. now.
Well, Mark Giordano had a good playoff for the Leafs.
Sure.
A lot of those guys that moved.
Hey, Andrew Kopp in New York.
Yeah, have some significance. When I look at Boston, I think when you take the big three away, and if one of them is retiring, it becomes the big two. What else is there up front? Like, it's not much there you can look at and say, oh, the future's pretty good with these guys.
Well, I think they're gonna have to rebuild.
Pretty good back end.
Well, KP,
it's a back end that's coming, right? So they'll have Lindholm and McAvoy, and a lot of teams would like that combination. It's interesting, Steve, how quickly you and I do the same. How quickly you discount Taylor Hall in that mix, right?
Well, Taylor Hall's a non-factor. I'm sorry, he's been a non-factor since he won the Hart Trophy in New Jersey. I still don't know how he won it, but Taylor Hall's a non-factor on any team he plays on these days. I remind you what he did in Buffalo.
He's just a middle of the road, flash in, flash out kind of winger who I don't think wins you anything. You got to have centers. They don't really have centers.
Right. Yeah. That's their big issue.
And you take Bergeron away, you're talking about what? A Hall of Fame center and the best two-way player we've seen in the last 15 years. And, how do you replace that? You can't replace that. It's irreplaceable.
So if you're reading the tea leaves, both managements, both coaching staffs in Toronto and Boston are fine. There's no changes coming in either place, Steve and Kevin.
Well, honestly, it's hard to read the tea leaves on the Leafs. And the reason is most teams have an owner. And the owner is the guy who demands this is how things work. And the Leafs don't really have an owner. They have two corporations that hate each other, that are in partnership and never agree on anything in business, and have to come together just because they're in partnership and in ownership of the Leafs. And they have Larry Tannenbaum in the middle seat, who loves every person who's ever worked for him in every job and would never fire anybody. But if there was I use Jacobs as an example in Boston. If Jacobs owned the Leafs and they just had their ninth clinching game where they didn't manage to get through, somebody's ass would be out the door. just as it happened with the New York Rangers last year, just as it's happened in a lot of places, Montreal this year. So whether it would have been Brendan Shanahan or Kyle Dubas or Sheldon Keefe or all of them, if the Leafs were owned in a normal circumstance of professional sports, people would be getting fired today. I don't know if anyone's going to get fired right now.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with you. I don't have any idea either. I think the general manager ought to be a little worried.
What would you do, Bob?
Well, I think the first thing you got to do is figure out whether this team actually is good enough to advance, because they haven't advanced and they've been disappointing at this core at least 4 straight times. And they have needs. And in order to accomplish those things, I think they're going to have to make some serious decisions. Tavares, for the most part, had a down year and didn't do anything in the playoffs until. We all love Tavares. We all respect the career he's had. Probably
they can't
a Hall
get rid
of
of
Fame.
That contract, Bob. They
Sorry?
can't.
You can't get
They
rid
can't
of
get
it.
rid of. They can't get rid of that contract.
So, and you're not going to do anything with Marner or Matthews. So what's left?
Oh, that's William Nylander.
That's correct.
And that's where it gets complicated, because dollar for dollar, Nylander's their best buy. He's a flaky thing. You don't know what day you're getting what from him. But
or if you're getting anything from him.
For dollar value in today's game, which is so important, he's the best buy they have. And he drives.
But what are your options, Steve?
You know what? I want to hear from, I don't know if it's Barry Trotz or the next best general manager you can find. I wish Jimmy Rutherford was available. I'd like to get someone's view from the outside of what this is, because the guys from the inside are all, buddy, and they're all together, and it's one for all and all for one, and nobody's going anywhere.
Well, hang on. KP's here. He's on the outside. As you look at this Toronto Maple Leaf team, what would you do?
Okay, you've come to the right place. So I wish at that prompting, I wish I had a big bag of cash that I could show here, but I can't even show pocket change. So here's how you win. In the simplified KPD version of the hockey world, you win with a franchise goalie, you win with a franchise defenseman, and a franchise pivot. You've got to have those three. That's your holy trinity. Tampa, of course, front and center. So I don't think the Leafs have the franchise goalie. I don't think they have the franchise defenseman. And by the looks of it to me, I'm not there day to day. It looks to me like they've got a president and a GM who have fallen in love with 4 forwards. And it also strikes me, I'm not sure they agree on who they love most, right? So they got to go out and get a goalie, by my eye. They got to go get out the defenseman, and they somehow have to use the assets that are in those front 4 forwards. That would be my suggestion. As Steve said, it's complicated.
Here's the problem with what you're proposing. Number one, where you're getting that franchise goalie from. There's about 4 of them in the league. And I think other than those 4, everybody else is good year, bad year. And so you don't know which guy, good year, bad year, you're getting at any given time.
Well, the answer here was to go to Toronto and get Tuukka Rask.
Yeah. The answer was never to trade Tuukka Rask. But there's a whole other, complication in that. Franchise D, I went through this one. Number 1 defenseman in the NHL, what I call a defenseman. There's about 8 of them. There's not much more than that.
But the Toronto Maple Leafs obviously feel that Morgan Riley is one of those.
Well, he's not.
They just extended him for a long period of time. In fact, his new contract is going to hinder them doing a lot of stuff they need to do as well.
Well, everything. The problem is they're, because of COVID and because of some contracts that you might question, they're penniless. Basically, they have no money. They have to, find a way to spend something on something. So to get that defenseman Kevin talks about, like, who is he? Are the Bruins trading McAvoy?
Of course not.
Are the Rangers trading Adam Fox?
No, now they got it here, and this brings up another point to that whole equation. They got it here with Zdeno Chara. They got their franchise defenseman there.
Yeah.
And I probably, the four of us probably could have a discussion whether he was then or was ever truly a number one franchise defenseman.
Oh, absolutely, so he was.
Yes.
But it can be, yeah, but not in the tradition of thinking like Doughty, who's going to go get you all those points, or Pietrangelo is going to. That wasn't him. But you've got to have that figure on the back line that the entire defensive core coalesces around.
Well, not only that, Kevin. I mean, what Chara was such an amplification in the room and on the bench and on the ice of what the Bruins were. Between he and Bergeron, between he and Patrice, they created that aura that team went to Stanley Cup Finals because of those players.
Right.
They were that important.
I'm going to date myself for a minute, but Rod Langway changed the Washington Capitals when he went there in the mid 80s or early 80s. He took a team that never won anything, and he got there, and he was a presence, and everything built around him. He didn't score. He didn't get any points, but he was the franchise changer in that circumstance. But again, go through the NHL right now. You know, there's Cale Makar, and there's Hedman, and there's Yossi. There's not a lot. And how are you going to find that guy?
So and you don't think Riley is in that group?
This Fox, Makar.
Offensively, yes. Offensively, Morgan Riley is an elite defenseman. Defensively, he is an average to below average defenseman. If you look at how many goals he's on the ice for scored against the Leafs, he was on a list this year with, I think he was in the top 10 in goals against, and all other 9 guys were on teams that didn't make the playoffs, which gives you an indication of how often he's getting scored on. And he's playing right now. He was playing with Lyubushkin, who's, run of the mill, 6th defenseman on most teams. And what the Leafs need to find is because you can't find an A, is a partner for Riley, somebody that you can partner him with that makes him all that much better. Where the goalie comes from, I don't know. I think they have the center, though, Kevin. I'm convinced they have the center.
Okay,
he's going to win the Hart Trophy this year. I'm not a fan of him personally, but I'm sure a fan of him professionally.
I don't think he's coming to your house for like any dinner soon either, Steve. So it's okay.
You know what? My cooking, I'm not sure I want anybody coming.
But I think you've underscored my point here, which is they're top heavy, they're front loaded, and until you get those 2 other pieces sorted out, it's going to be Sisyphus every year up there.
By the way, everybody, I mean, I know Chara was a free agent, but the guys, that you mentioned in Roman Josi and Victor Hedman, Charlie McAvoy, how did they get to their teams? Through the draft.
Sure.
Through the draft.
Hey,
that's
the guy in Dallas, by the way, is a number 1 defenseman.
Absolutely, no question.
Underrated player in the NHL.
The only asterisk to what you've said there, John, is Fox. They did deal for Fox. So
but that's because Adam Fox, who was drafted by Calgary, didn't want to play in Calgary, didn't want to play in Carolina, and played the poker game and won.
Correct. So and again, but again, it happened, and good on the Rangers for making it happen. So it can be done. It's a very narrow window, as it was with getting Chara. They paid way above market in their estimation to bring in Chara.
By the way, just as an aside, and this has got nothing to do with anything. Who signed Chara and who signed Adam Fox? A guy named Jeff Gorton.
Right.
Peter Chiarelli made the deal with Chara while he was still the assistant general manager of the Ottawa Senators before leaving to become the Bruins GM, I believe. And it was kind of a little under the table thing.
I'm not so sure.
I think it hit noon. It was a Saturday, and I think it hit noon. And Chara was signed at 12:01.
One of the things it's ancient history. One of the things the Senators did that really ticked Chara off was they went and signed Wade Redden first.
Yeah, and they made a decision, and it was the wrong.
They made a decision, Redden over Chara, and that was a terrible mistake.
They've been paying for it ever since.
We have a long off season to discuss more on the Maple Leafs and the Bruins, and things will evolve during this off season. I don't doubt that'll influence.
We didn't even get to Justin Holl for Steve. I mean, you see, Steve, he's got. I mean, The most famous clip of Sheldon Keefe this year was Steve's question about Justin Holt to Sheldon. So everybody talked about it.
There was nothing wrong with the question other than one word. I asked why he started his worst defenseman. I should have asked him why he started his sixth defenseman or seventh or eighth if the other guys are healthy. I should have done that. It was my mistake to create a firestorm that really shouldn't have been there. But the Leafs played their absolute worst game of the year in that playoff game, and I became the story the next day. So it just shows to show you how off the rails things can get in the world of social media.
Well, by the way, coaches love that. The coaches love to have distractions so they actually don't have to worry about the real stories of what's going on with their team.
Can we go to Game 7 for 1 second? Who set the Shaquille O'Neal pick that allowed John Tavares to move around him and get a goal? You know who did that? Justin
Number
Holt.
3.
Who gave the puck away 3 times in his own zone in the third period, attempting to get out when you're trailing by a goal? Number 3, Justin Holt. He's marginal. And when you play marginal guys make marginal mistakes.
We have the opportunity here to address 4 series upcoming before any games are played in them, and we will attempt to do that, if not otherwise distracted, with Steve Simmons and Kevin Paul Dupont. We'll come back after these messages. Simmons, Dupont, Shannon, McCowan.
You're not suggesting that this group has any bit of ADD or anything, are you?
I'm not suggesting it at all. I'm insisting on it.
We're not the 4 temptations, we're the 4 tangentials.
Well,
Kevin, you have used 2 big words here that I am going to have to go and look up after the show. This is hard on me.
We have 2 series here that are absolute geographic rivalries, which, as mentioned earlier, is I guess Gary Bettman's dream. Florida, Tampa, and Calgary, Edmonton. Let's start with Florida, Tampa. We sort of touched on this a little bit, but who do you like and why? KP, we'll go to you first.
Emotionally, I like Florida because I just a better story in terms of a team that hasn't been there for so long. I think Zito's done a masterful job of recreating, massaging that roster. That said, it's hard for me from a practical, that's the emotional side of me. From a practical standpoint, just to go back where Steve started off here, I just think they remain the team to beat. I think Vasilevsky is such a tremendous goaltender, not to take anything away from the way Bobrovsky's played, although not to Vasilevsky's level. I still like Tampa in that series. I love their coaching. I've loved everything about them for their whole run here. Even the year they got knocked off by Columbus, I thought they were a terrific team.
But Bobrovsky is a fascinating guy to watch because you don't know from game to game and period to period whether you're getting the great goalie Bobrovsky or a guy who has no idea how to stop the puck. And it's amazing to watch. I spent a lot of time in South Florida this year. He can be as good as anyone. He is phenomenal when he's at his best. And you talk about it, Kevin, you have to have that big center. They have that in Barkov. You have to have that great defenseman. I think they have that in Ekblad. And so they have all those things that you say. I just don't know from Monday to Tuesday and period 1 to period 2 what Bobrovsky is. And if he can be the good Bobrovsky, then this is a deep Florida Panthers team. This is a team that's got all kinds of offensive coming at you in different ways. And unfortunately, because of circumstances, Joel Quenneville had to depart when the season began. But I think had a Joel Quenneville, John Cooper series gone on, I think that would have been a fascinating thing to watch. I think, I will tip the advantage to Tampa because of their goaltending and because of their coach.
Yeah. The only question I have about Tampa is how severe is Braden Point's injury? It certainly doesn't look very good, so it's difficult to figure out whether it's a groin or a quad or whatever it is. and how that will affect what happens to a guy who really is a great playoff performer. The other thing about the rivalry is this is not going to be a rivalry, and Steve knows this from our days together in Alberta. This is not going to be a rivalry until Florida wins. Florida has to win a series for this to be a real rivalry, because Tampa at this point just doesn't care. Tampa just wins.
You also have to look at the markets. Tampa has become one of the best hockey markets in America. It is the only one that I'm aware of where the NHL team is more popular and more loved than the NFL team or the baseball team. Like, it's number one in that market. The Florida Panthers don't even exist in South Florida. Like, they're an invisible thing. They don't even get covered in the newspaper during the season. Like, it's pretty amazing how they play sort of, unnoticed, so to speak. And they've had this phenomenal year, won the President's Trophy, great year. And, they led from start to finish. They were like the racehorse that started the Derby and went the whole way. Mm-hmm. I just wish in South Florida that I couldn't go to my local golf club and get a 2-for-1 Panthers pass with my tee time, which you still get with free parking, by the way.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring this up, because I've been down to Tampa a ton of times to cover games down there. Part of what makes them sexy is where they are. They've got that Emily Arena is right there.
Right.
Vinnick is building out the property around it. There's a buzz to the place. There's a sexiness to being there. Florida, Sunrise, I mean, it is god awful. It's just that arena out by the road. And
it's a good mall, though.
What's that?
A good shopping mall.
Yeah. It's just there's not. So I think, as we've seen throughout the league here in recent years, there's this emphasis on putting arenas down into a play, because so much of the event now, and this isn't necessarily this is not the playoffs. Never mind, not necessarily. So much of the event now is you go to the building, it's the food, it's the music, all these things that didn't matter in original 6 days. Now there's got to be something there other than the hockey. Mm-hmm. The experience, the building, the atmosphere around it, the place, the setting. Florida, I don't know if it'll ever have it. I really don't.
But John's right. Florida has to win for this to be a rivalry.
Yes.
Yeah. It's never really been a rivalry before, other than, the two Florida teams are playing. Where Calgary, Edmonton is like, War of the Roses going back to the 80s, maybe the greatest hockey that I've ever seen in my life.
Well, we'll get to them in a second. Before we do that, let's go around the table here and make some predictions for what it's worth, which is really nothing. Shannon, we'll let you kick off. Florida or Tampa?
Tampa. I can't go after what I saw against the Maple Leafs, how they found a way to win. I can't go against the champs.
Kevin?
Yeah, I'm saying, just for all the stuff we talked about, for roster makeup, coaching, all of it, I still think they're going to squeeze it out.
Steve?
If I thought the Panthers played better in round one, I might have gone in their direction. I did not like the way they played. I did not like the way they prepared. I'm going to have to go Tampa Bay.
The correct answer is Florida. And,
of course it is.
Because I watched all 7 games against the Maple Leafs, I thought Tampa should have dominated the Maple Leafs, and they did not. And part of it was Vasilevsky was ordinary in the first 5 games. And we even talked about whether he might be hurt. He certainly didn't look hurt in 6, and he definitely didn't look hurt in 7. So I give him that. But I'm going to go with Florida. The other rivalry, Calgary-Edmonton. Let's get to that one. This one intriguing because you probably would have said Calgary should have had an easier route through round one than Edmonton did. Or perhaps you thought LA was the light horse here, but they both wound up going the max. How do you weigh the relative merits of these two teams based on how they played in series 1? KP?
I go with Calgary here. I think the grittier it gets, the grittier the coach gets. I think they've bought into the whole, Daryl Sutter ethos here. I don't get that feeling at all from the Edmonton team. I like them, obviously, what McDavid did and all of it. But I still think Calgary, as it ratchets down here, Calgary's going to get tougher.
Steve?
If you had asked me this question a week ago, 10 days ago, before the playoffs began, I would have said Calgary, absolutely. Structure, toughness, grittiness, all of that. Then the playoffs began, and they were life and death to beat the Dallas Stars, who I don't think all that much of. And game 4, 5, 6, and 7, if a player wants to make a look at me scream, Connor McDavid did that. If he's ever played better than he did in those 4 games, then I haven't seen it. He was sensational. Like if you look at his points and you look at Gaudreau's points, for example, and you compare watching both of them in the playoffs, it's like 2 different animals. I had said the other day that Crosby was the best player in the playoffs, and then Crosby got hurt, and I'm changing my notice now and putting McDavid there. And because McDavid was so brilliant, and he's like possessed right now, and I think he's going to carry them to the win.
Well, no one would argue that suggestion of his greatness, without question. What do you do if you're Calgary? What do you do to stop or slow down a McDavid? Do you focus on him, or do you individually, or do you focus on him as a team? Anybody have thoughts?
Well, one thought comes to mind immediately, which is what was the Ranger cure for Crosby? And that was to send Trouba after him. So, yeah. And I'm not advocating that, but I also don't think it was happenstance or coincidence. I think
no, neither do I, actually.
I think that was a targeted hit. And
hey, your friend Milan Lucic plays for the Flames, Kevin.
Yeah. So
but here's the thing: Milan Lucic has to catch Connor McDavid, and that's not possible.
No,
it's not.
What is possible is they can find some physical way to try to neutralize him. And I have to think that's somewhere in the top 3 points. And I don't like that, but it still exists today. And I suppose that's not going to change.
Does Calgary have to neutralize McDavid in order to win? Or can they win on their own? Can they win by playing their game, as was mentioned earlier? Because if you get into a run and gun, Calgary probably can't compete with Edmonton.
Right.
But I think, Bob, the biggest question, play their game. And I think the question becomes after, as Kevin and Steve talked about, after the Dallas series, what is Calgary's game right now? What is it?
One of the things here is we have the most exciting player in the NHL on one team. And we had for 82 games, the best line in the NHL on the other team. And the best line in the NHL wasn't overly dominant in any way in the first round. Like you barely saw Tkachuk at times, and Gaudreau was in and out, and Lindholm, who had a marvelous year. These are 3 guys, all 40 goal scorers on the same line. Which of that group is the Calgary first line going to dominate Edmonton? And the thing with McDavid can do it by himself. I mean, we've seen that goal where he scores,
Agreed.
He scored one of them against LA on the rush. You come down the ice at full speed, you cut left, you cut right, bang, you shoot on the move, bang, it's in the net. Like, he can do things no one else can do. And I've never seen him this intense. I don't know if John, if you see it the same way, but I've never seen him as packaged and ready to play this kind of hockey.
I think this is the best hockey he's ever played. I mean, going all the way back to Erie when he was a man amongst boys, I think this is the best hockey he's ever played in his career. I really do. That's how good it is.
Well, invariably, we get down to goaltending. Yep. And it would seem that Calgary has a definitive advantage there. Agreed?
Huge advantage. You're talking the second best or third best goalie in the NHL this season in Markstrom. And Mike Smith is the 30th or 34th best, or wherever you want to put him. That's where he is.
The problem is Smith has been so streaky, and right now he's on a heater. He's really been good. He went undefeated for the month of April. He made one gaffe in one game in the series against Los Angeles. He looks awkward. He doesn't play a structured style of the position, but right now he's stopping the puck. And that's where the two of them are so opposite.
Well,
I mean, Markstrom's a scientist. He's got everything's calculated. And then Mike's the mad scientist, and he just stops it.
Well, one thing also, which is why it's hard to figure this series out, is Calgary just beat the Dallas Stars, who I don't think anybody in the world thought had a chance in the series, in overtime in Game 7. And Edmonton just beat the LA Kings, who some of us would have thought might have been a team that wouldn't make the playoffs. And neither of those teams would have been in the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. And so you've got where both teams went 7 games with lesser opponents. You know, we don't know what they're ready for when the opponent against them is an equal or someone real. And that's what's fascinating to me about this series, because they both come off, as great as McDavid played, they still had to go to the third period of Game 7 before they were in position to win the darn thing.
Well, time is our enemy here, as we have 2 more series to address. So let's go around the table again. And who do you like? And we'll start with Kevin.
Colorado, St. Louis we're going to?
No, Calgary.
Calgary, Edmonton. Who do you like?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I'm going with Calgary there. Yeah.
Steve?
I'm gonna take Edmonton. I'm on the McDavid bandwagon right now. I just think this is his time.
John?
I'd like it to go 9. Is there any way it can go 9 games? Because I think it's going to be that good, and I think it's going to be that long. I think the Oilers win. I really do, because of Connor.
You put that series in the old Boston Garden, we could get it to 9 with the transformer blowing out.
I think we did that a couple of times already.
The correct answer, of course, is Calgary. Move along. St. Louis, Colorado. Everybody loves Colorado. Everybody loved Colorado. All you guys have been on the Colorado bandwagon, and finally they performed.
Well, most guys, not all of us.
The way, with expectation, wiped out Nashville and should have been a 3-game series. 4th game was irrelevant. Are they that much better than St. Louis, who had a pretty good run?
Mm-hmm.
Especially over the last couple of months at least. What do you expect there, KP? Another rollover for Colorado?
I'm too deep into the stream with Colorado now to pull the whole San Jose thing and worry about them. And I just, especially, I love the defenseman, the way he plays, and I hope this is a series where we get to see that highlighted. I think they're the better team in personnel. I just think, they had the easy time in round 1, all of it. I just think I still think they're going to roll here. And I know I'm vulnerable to being, bitten in the ass, just like San Jose bit us in the ass that many times, but I'm going to stick with them.
Steve?
I think St. Louis is one of these surprising teams that is way deeper than almost every team in the league. I think they had 8 20-goal scorers.
9, actually.
And Ryan O'Reilly had 19. So, so it's amazing depth that team has, and amazing strength, and they understand how to play playoff hockey and winning playoff hockey. And right now, Jordan Binnington seems to be at the kind of level he was at the year they won the Cup. Like everybody else, I love Colorado. I love the top of their roster. I love the first 2 lines offensively. I love Makar on defense, and after that it drops off quite significantly. And Taves as a pair. I just think St. Louis is too deep and too experienced and too strong and too good in goal. And maybe McKinnon and Makar will light it up and win it on their own. But I think as a team that knows how to win and knows how to play playoff hockey, I'm going with St. Louis.
There's a similarity there, isn't there, between Berube and Brind'Amour in terms of how a team accepts it, buys into it, carries it through.
St. Louis has more depth of scoring than Carolina does. And so, you get, and guys are emerging. A young guy like Thomas has really become a great player. And Tarasenko is back playing the way we've seen him play before. And then you add in O'Reilly and Shen and Perron. And, none of them, not one of those guys, I'm going to say, oh, that guy's Connor McDavid. None of them are. Or none of them are McKinnon or Makar. But collectively, boy, that's a good hockey team.
John?
I think that's the key. I mean, I have a difficult time betting against Ryan O'Reilly on anything right now. I just think he has a way to win. Jordan Kyrou is a big factor for St. Louis. And you talk about, strength up the middle. Colton Parayko is a stud on the blue line for St. Louis. I think I've got the Blues winning the Stanley Cup, so I better pick the Blues.
So John's going with the Blues. Colorado for KP, I'm quite sure. He's already kind of announced. Yep. Simmons, you seem to be a bit on the fence.
No, I'm going with the Blues. I just think they're too deep and too strong for what Colorado has up top, which, they're going to have to, their great players are really going to have to be great against St. Louis.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want my friend Dupont on his own, so I'm going to go with Colorado, although I have absolutely no trust in their ability to do what they're more than capable of doing. And I do think there's a San Jose effect. And I said it at the beginning of the year. In fact, I said it last year, and so far I've been right with both of them. Let's get to the last series, Rangers, Carolina. Carolina is there, is not surprising. That the Rangers are there, is it surprising to you, Simmons?
It wasn't if until Crosby got hurt. I thought Pittsburgh was going to win that series, and I thought they were outplaying them rather significantly. And I thought Shesterkin, the all-world goalie, was playing horribly. And so everything was leaning towards Pittsburgh winning the series. And then Sid got hurt, and everything
that was that.
After that. When I look at Carolina and the Rangers, to me, it's one team that is completely structured. They are structured. They understand how to play. They have the most underrated defenseman in the NHL in Jacob Slavin. They have a lot of guys who you don't think about as guys who are going to make differences in playoff series. But it seems like you could almost take the names off the back of the jerseys on that team, and everybody seems the same. I think the Rangers are almost an unstructured team. They can be explosive in moments, and Shesterkin, if he gets back to form, can be absolutely game-changing. But I don't think they play with the kind of structure that gives them enough of an opportunity to beat Carolina.
Well, the question at the beginning of this KP series was goaltending, as it is with every series. And the Rangers have a young goaltender who has played very well. Carolina had a goaltender they relied on most of the year who got hurt. Is that what it's going to come down to?
Good. I was really disappointed in Shesterkin. I thought we were going to see brilliance from him, and he was highly ordinary. We don't know if Anderson is back. That could be a factor there too. For
positive or negative?
Well, yeah, you can make. I'll say positive just based on the year he's had, and I'm not looking at that through the Bruins filter. But I will just say, from what I've seen, from what I saw of Carolina over these 7 games, they're fast, they're quick. D'Angelo is a far bigger factor than I figured. They've bought full in, just as the Blues bought full in 3 years ago to Berube. So I think they're going to be very, very difficult to beat. The Rangers they're a fun story. They're interesting parts. But I do think, in terms of cohesiveness and mission, I think Carolina's got it on them right now.
I do look forward to watching Tony DeAngelo go back into the Garden.
Yes,
for games 3 and 4. It will be fun. I think this is actually going to be a short series, guys. I think Carolina wins a lot quicker than most people realize.
Well, I think if Pittsburgh had its normal goaltending and for the whole series, that might have been a 5-game series too.
Everybody going with Carolina then in that series?
Seems to be.
Yep, sweeping it.
Can't argue with you as much as I would like to. That'll do it for round 2. We hope we've at least entertained you, if not provided a smidgen of information. I'm not positive we can be accused of that. But boys, thank you as always. And if the creek don't rise, we'll invite you back for the next round, or perhaps even sooner than that. Kevin, Steve, thanks, guys. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
We'll come back and wrap it after this message. We are back. Our thanks to Kevin, Paul Dupont, Steve Simmons for joining us on the program, and we'll certainly invite them back at the very least when this round ends.
Yeah.
How worried are you about the Toronto Blue Jays hitting, which now continues? We are now late in the month of May, and there has been no definitive improvement.
After that horrendous schedule, and then last week with the 2 days off, you'd hope that it would come back into play and be more effective. I want to give it another week, Bob. I want to give it another week so that they can't complain about the schedule. And now that they've been rested a bit more, you get them home for a little bit of time. I think that's a big part of it right now. This has just been a brutal part of a schedule that has been tough on the Jays. So I want to wait another 7 to 10 days before I start to panic.
I don't disagree with the schedule situation. It has been awful, as bad as you can have for a first 8 weeks or 7 weeks of a regular season. But I am very concerned that there hasn't been definitive improvement. And
I tell you what, I get even more concerned, Bob, when the hitting's bad and then George Springer gets hurt. So when he went into the wall, I started to get a little nervous.
Well, the only guy who's really hit the ball consistently. I mean, you can look at the first baseman and say, well, he went through a slump. He was great the first few weeks and then went through a slump. That may be true, but
Vladdy and Bo, they're still scary to me.
Well, we'll talk about Bo extensively at some other time. Also, we should make note the PGA starts this week, and we'll perhaps have some conversation about that as the second major of the season in the golf world commences. That'll do it for us. We hope you enjoyed it. Come back tomorrow if you can. For John Shannon, Bob McCowan. See ya.